challenging. If there was one word that I could use to describe this build so far, challenging would be it. This has been such a difficult build, and you would think that using a DEM would simplify things, right? Everything's there. Look, it's all right there. I could just look, and basically you're just connecting the dots, filling in the blanks, just tracing over these lines. But this is really not as easy as you would think, and I'm gonna explain why. First of all, the terrain is not exactly as you would expect. So there's still a lot of terraforming that you need to do, and terrain forming and that sort of thing. And a lot of that I've been doing off camera. You can see that the track here is way more elevated than the rest of the area along with the road. And I'm slowly bringing up the terrain and raising it because what I had found out, at least in this area, I don't know if this is going to be how it is for the rest of the map, it didn't seem like it was the right height. So you got the Erie Canal there, and I don't know if the DEM sort of traced out the height of the water, like the top of the water, instead of the bottom of the water. I don't know how these things work. But what I found is that it didn't line up right, and I had track that was basically underwater if you were using the canal as your water level, I guess. So I had to make some adjustments with that. The other thing is that the rest of the roads and the terrain that the roads go on isn't leveled, I guess, or it's not exact. So there's still a lot of fine-tuning that you have to do. And this isn't really so troubling, when it comes to just laying down roads and stuff like that. The real challenge comes when you're trying to put down buildings. And the thing with Fairport, which is where we're working today, I forgot to mention that, is that this whole town is built on a hill. And I don't know if you've ever tried to build anything in Trainz on a hill, specifically a town, but it's not easy. It's really difficult. It's challenging. It's very challenging. And to make things even more difficult, the scale of the buildings that we have in the game don't exactly match up one-to-one with the type of buildings that are in real life. So for me, the challenging thing was to really just let go. And I say that because I really did almost just put this project down because it wasn't working out the way that I wanted to. And let me explain why. I don't really consider myself a perfectionist. I like to match things as best as possible, and I want them to look as real as possible. And I when it comes to making a scene like this where I'm recreating something out of real life, I want it to be identical. And I was really struggling to try to make this a one-to-one build, and it's just not possible. It's not possible. You don't have the same buildings, the exact same structures that are in the game. As you can see here, I'm just going to break away from that thought for a second. Here's a flyover. I did all the building placement off camera because of this. I spent a lot of time trying to find the right buildings in the right footprint. And when I say a lot of time, I mean days. And I'm still not completely happy with it. But I spent a lot of time just trying to organize this off camera because it was so time consuming. I was like, my whole video is just going to be me searching for buildings. So let me just do this off camera, and then the rest of the video can just be, me detailing these areas and stuff. But back to my thought about trying to recreate this in one-to-one. It's really difficult because the buildings are not the same size. They're not the same scale. You don't have the exact same buildings. And I really struggled with this because I've been to Fairport. I spent a lot of time in Fairport. I know what it really looks like, and I want it to be exact. And I know, judging by the comments that I got on my previous videos and the comments that I get on Facebook and Twitter, there's a lot of you out there who are from the area. So I know that there's a lot of people who are going to watch this and are going to be like, no, that's not really what Fairport looks like. And you're right, it's not. And it really bothered me, but I had to let go and basically just use selective compression to get the overall look and the overall effect of the area and the feel of the area without trying to place every exact building in the exact spot and putting road markings and parking lots in the exact same spot as it is if you were to look at it in Google Earth. I think I did a pretty good job by the end of it. I'll show you a couple cutaways to to show you Google Earth versus the real thing, and then a couple photographs from the area, which, again, it's not exact, it's not perfect, but I think using selective compression and having the track laid out in the proper schematic and everything, if you're from the area, you'll at least recognize it and be like, okay, yeah, this is Fairport. It's not perfect. It looks close. You know, and I tried to incorporate some of the trademark things of Fairport, one of which is this crossing here, which is really unique. There's a gantry on the one side of it. I believe it's what would that be? The south side. And then on the north side, there's a gate. And I actually think, maybe I missed it. I think that there is a gate on the south side underneath the gantry. So I might have to go back and add that in. I just noticed that. But there's also a traffic light that faces the traffic from the north so that people don't stop on the tracks. This is a very busy area, and you'll see in one of the photographs that I put at the end, they have street fairs and all kinds of stuff right on this main strip, and it gets pretty busy, so that the crossing protection is pretty solid, I think. There's also some pedestrian gates, I believe, in the real thing, which I didn't put in here because I don't think there is a TRC version of crossing gates at the moment. And speaking of TRC, it does kind of work in Trainz 19. It was broken for a really long time, but I have managed to get it to work by putting in all my configurations, saving, and then quitting the game, and then reloading the game, and then all the configurations seem to kind of be set in there. So it does work. It's not perfect, and I think it has to do with this unified surveyor driver thing. I think that the script doesn't really know when to commit the changes or something like that. That's just my guess. But you can get it to work. It's still a little finicky. But anyway, I thought I would mention that. Continuing on, some of the other trademark areas here is this, I don't know if you would call it a parking lot, but this trackside alignment here. A lot of rail fans hang out there, which I'll place at the end. I have a few photographs from that spot, and I've met a couple other rail fans in this area when I used to live out there. So I wanted to make sure that I incorporated this since it is a very unique spot, and there's a lot of photographs and a lot of video from there. If you go on YouTube and you just search Fairport, New York railfan or something like that, there's dozens of photos and videos from there. So definitely check that out. What else do I need to talk about here? Oh, along with using the DEM and trying to make this as realistic as possible, one of the other things that I'm finding really challenging and I'm really struggling with is the track profile, I believe you would call it. And that is like, you know, the grades, where it's level, where we're going up a grade and down a grade. I'm gonna just say it here. That is not something that I'm stressing myself out over to make exact, and because I don't know. I don't have track profile maps, and I honestly think that if I was to sit here and try to match the track profile, this project is never gonna get done. And as it is, this is gonna take me an eternity to do. So I really can't spend too much time like getting wrapped up in the minutia of that. However, there are some spots that I really am not sure what the grade is supposed to be doing, and I'm kind of just using my best guess and my best judgment based on the DEM information that I have, and then going into Google Earth and satellite view and kind of flying around and just seeing how the tracks are and seeing if I can get a street level view or if there's any photographs out there. There's a section just west of here going to the city of Rochester where I'm not really sure if what I have is a grade down and you're heading towards Rochester, and I don't know if that's correct or not, but there's like a 1% grade going down, and it would have been way more extreme. I don't think that there really is a 1% grade there. I think it might be a lot less, but in my version there's a grade, and it's just something that we're gonna have to live with. And I think unless you actually run trains on this in real life, nobody's really gonna notice. I don't think. I'm trying to keep it realistic. Like there's no unrealistic grades here. Oh, by the way, what's happening on screen here is an interesting bug. In 3V, if you're watching this, there's some kind of tree duplication. Those trees were all ghost trees. Back up a little tiny bit, rewind it and rewatch it. But this happened to be multiple times, only specifically with this tree, where it would make ghost trees that I couldn't move, but I couldn't delete them, and they were stuck there until I relogged out of the game, relaunched it, and very strange stuff. But anyway, back to the track gradient. again, I don't know. I'm not a professional. I'm trying to keep it realistic, and just kind of use my best judgment as to where there's going to be a grade up or a grade down. But as far as what it matches in real life, it's probably not going to be perfect. But in terms of operating it in the game, I think it'll be good enough and close enough and enjoyable enough to make some sense. Obviously, it's Western New York, so it's relatively flat, but it's not completely flat, so there is some grades up and down here and there. I should point out that right in this area of Fairport, the thing that makes it particularly interesting is that you've got a triple track main line. The 2 tracks on the top side there go to Rochester and continue westward from there, while the lower track is the West Shore, I guess the former West Shore. I'm not really sure the history of it, if that was where the main line would go originally, and then they built these other tracks that went to Rochester. I don't really know what the history is exactly, but the lower track it's the West Shore, and it essentially bypasses Rochester. It goes south of it, cuts through Henrietta and a couple other small towns. I think there's a couple industries along there, but it's mostly used as a bypass for when Goodman Yard in Rochester gets a little backed up and they need to send some mainline through trains around the city. So it's a really interesting spot. The junction for that is a little bit east, in between where we're working today and where we were working in the previous episode. So there's some pretty cool switching that can happen there, or not switching, but mainline action. Another key feature that I think is really important to Fairport is it's the Erie Canal. It's a beautiful canal, and right through the town here, it's pretty well maintained, and the whole canal is gorgeous and really well maintained, but the whole length of it from, I don't even know where, it's like west of Rochester all the way out to, like, I don't know, 70 miles or something like that. There's like a canal trail alongside the trail, or alongside the canal, that you can bike on and walk on and stuff like that. And it's paved in some areas, it's gravel in other areas, and I might have mentioned this in my last video, but it's a key feature, and it's really, really nice to walk on. But everything here in Fairport is very well landscaped and maintained, so of course I had to add some of that. There's a lot of details that still need to be added to this whole area, by the way. Like, this is not, by the time we get to the end of this and you see the cinematics, this is not by any means a completed scene, completed city. There's plenty of details that need to be added. I need to add some boats into the canal, and cars parked, and people, and there's a lot of other stuff that I need to add, but it's coming together pretty nicely. But like I said, it's been incredibly challenging to get to this point, and it didn't start to feel like, I didn't feel confident about it until I got to I guess about this point where I was finally starting to get into some of the scenery, and I got the buildings down, because the roads just didn't look right and the buildings didn't quite look right. But as I started to add other elements into it, it all began to come together a little bit more, and it felt a little bit more cohesive. So I guess that's like a lesson learned right there, where, if you get into a roadblock in the game, or in a build where you're not really sure if it's going to work, just kind of push through and keep going. A lot of these scenes don't really look good and don't come together until you finally get these little detail things down, and then finally it all brings it together, and then you've got like a cohesive finished piece. It's kind of like, I guess if you were to do like a painting or a drawing and you do a sketch first, the sketch is not, it's not going to look that great. You leave a lot of the details out and you just try to get the idea out. But the more time you spend on it, the more you progress with it, the more problems you'll solve, the more details you'll add, and then it eventually kind of comes together into something. But you have to like get yourself to that point and not just put the pen down and say, forget it, I give up. So that's my advice for that one. Some of the other things about this area is that this bridge here over the canal on Main Street, in real life, it's actually a drawbridge, and there was just no way, there's no way to replicate that in the game. And the other thing that was really challenging is in this area, this strip, there's a lot more buildings in real life, and you just couldn't fit that amount in the game. The footprint just didn't match up, so I was completely unable to get more buildings in there. One thing I want to point out is that station that's in there that's kind of on an angle. It does seem kind of strange, and it is kind of strange, but there used to be, I think it was like in the early 1900s, like 1910, 1920, there was an electric interurban railway that ran along the length of the Erie Canal, and it kind of went up to that station and down the street that's across the street from it. I don't know how much further it went, and I can't quite remember what the name of the electric railway was. I want to say it was like the Rochester and Syracuse Electric Railway, possibly. Something like that. But there is still some little relics and elements of it here and there, and that station is one of them in Fairport. I think it might be a museum or something like that. I never went in it, but I think you can go into it. But anyway, I thought I'd point that out because it is kind of like a strange building in the middle. It doesn't really fit with anything else, but that's how it is. Now, in this area, I spent a lot of time trying to add like a stairway down to get down to the canal trail, because in real life there's a stairway that goes underneath, and the canal trail actually goes through a tunnel underneath the bridge. That was just completely impossible to try to do that in this game, so I'm trying to make something that at least has some it makes some sense, and probably is a detail that I could have left out because we're not really quite trackside, but again, it's something that I think helps, and I'm not super happy with it. There's some of it feels a little clunky. I don't know. I'm probably gonna come back and fine tune it when I come through here and add some more details and stuff like that. But you know, it's a good start. It's a decent start. Just trying to bring in some of these scenic trees and shrubs and stuff like that to hide that spline that I had to put in there because the grass does not match. It's not the same. But I think it works. It looks fairly decent. I was gonna bring in some fences here to fence that off, but I felt like I was spending too much time on this for this video, so I was like, forget it. Let me move on. Let's continue trying to make some progress on this area. I don't know how long this build is going to take me to do. I don't know if I'm ever really going to finish it, but I kind of... When I first got started on this build, I tweeted out that I felt like I bit off more than I can chew. And I do still feel like that, because this is a huge project. I've probably already sunk in, I don't know, 10 or 20 hours, and I've got maybe a half a mile of track done, and the surrounding area isn't even completed. Like, it's not even done. It's not even scenic or anything. So at my current rate, maybe I'll have this route done in, I don't know, by 2030 or something like that. But it's fine. It's fun. It's a fun build, and I'm looking forward to moving more westward and getting to Rochester and some areas that I'm much more familiar with, which again, I'm probably going to struggle with trying to make things exact, but it's one of those things again that I'm going to have to just use selective compression and take some artistic license and make sure that I just get the look and the effect, because there's literally no way to replicate this all one-to-one. But as new buildings come out and new assets are released and things like that, I'll definitely go back and update areas. The other thing that made this really challenging in this build was that there's not a whole lot of assets yet for Trainz 2019 that really look good. You can use all the old assets from previous versions of the game, but I mean, you've got this whole new lighting engine in Trainz 19 with PBR textures and all this other stuff, and the old assets just look old. They look very dated, and right now there's really just not much out there that looks good. I think these city block assets here that are in the foreground, those are made by Dave Snow, and I don't know how old they are. I think they might be from Trainz 2009, 2006. I don't know, but they still work, but there could be something a little bit better, so a lot of the time that I spent was just trying to find assets that would still kind of work in this version of the game. But as things come out and as things are released and I progress with the build, I'll come back and replace older assets with things that are newer and look more fitting for Trainz 19. But overall, I mean, it's coming together decently. It's coming together pretty nicely. Another thing I want to mention is that's Trainz 2019 specific, is the turf effects, the grass that you can kind of make and ground textures. I'm still trying to figure out how best to use that and what combinations of grass and clutter work best together. It's a new tool, and I don't know. I'm not familiar enough with all the grass assets and stuff like that. I'm also having a lot of issue with the grass just sort of splattering all over the place, like way outside of the marquee. And this is just my opinion here, but like you can turn that marquee down really tiny, but it's always red. You can't use it for anything. At least I haven't been able to. So I'm sitting here asking myself, like, what's the point of being able to turn the marquee down for really fine grass and shrub placement using this turf effects thing if I can't use it? And then, you know, half the time it just splatters outside of the marquee anyway. So maybe I'm using it wrong. Maybe there's something wrong with the tool. I have a feeling that it's probably just me. So I'll get into it. I'm still kind of playing with it, but we'll see. All right, so now we're going to get into a couple side-by-sides here. We've got Google Earth of Fairport. I'm going to do a little peel away for the same angle here in the game. It's not bad. It's close. Like I said, buildings are not matched one-to-one, but we're there. Here's a photograph I took in Fairport a couple years ago. And here's the, I don't know, Trainz version. It's close. It's not too bad. And I've got one more. We're looking to the west. This one is a little bit off. It's not bad. It's not bad. It's tough to match because, you know, everything is just a little bit different. But anyway, here's some cinematics for you guys. I'll leave it with you to enjoy. I hope you guys enjoyed this video and you're enjoying the series. I'll see you guys in the next one.